Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Welcome back to another episode of Who Will Be the Biggest Flop? This is part 17 for the weekend ending on December 10th, 2023. And please remember to like this video, please press the red subscribe button to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. We're going to begin this episode a little differently by first going over this weekend's domestic box office results. So let's have a warm welcome for the US opening of Hayao Miyazaki's newest animated movie, The Boy and the Heron, which opened in first place in this weekend's domestic box office by earning $12.8 million, which is now $13 million on Monday, December 11th, to add to its current international box office total of $74.3 million, to bring its current global gross box office revenue up to $87.3 million. The movie originally opened in Japanese theaters on July 14th and was then shown in a series of 20 various international film festivals between September 7th to November 19th. But it also started to be shown in broader international film markets beginning with Taiwan on October 6th, South Korea on October 25th, 4 European countries and Turkey between October 27th and November 3rd, 2 more European countries on November 9th and November 17th, 12 more countries including the United States between November 24th and December 8th, and it is scheduled to open in Hong Kong and 12 more countries between December 14th and February 8th, 2024. So, due to these staggered openings, doing projections for the movie's final global gross box office are not practical. Further, an exact figure for the movie's production budget has not been released, but we may be able to estimate what its minimal production budget might be from an interview with Studio Ghibli's veteran producer Toshio Suzuki, as was reported by an English-language Japanese-owned website entitled Sora News 24 in August, in which Suzuki said, quote, "I think that we spent more money making The Boy and the Heron than any other movie that's ever been made in Japan, probably," unquote. And the most expensive Japanese movie of all time prior to this interview was the 2013 Studio Ghibli film The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, which is said to have had a production budget of 5.15 billion yen, which equated to roughly $49.3 million based on the exchange rates of that time period. Now, if we convert 5.15 billion yen into US dollars using the exchange rate that existed when the August Sora News 24 article was published, then we can estimate that the production budget for The Boy and the Heron was not less than $35.3 million. And that's still very high, knowing that the production budget for the Japanese movie Godzilla Minus One, which is also currently playing in theaters, was only $15 million. In other words, the production budget for The Boy and the Heron may be around 2.35 to maybe 3.33 times the production budget for Godzilla Minus One, which gives us a range of $35.3 million to $50 million. And that's a guess based on the interview with Toshio Suzuki. But we also know that Studio Ghibli did not spend any money marketing the movie, at least not in Japan. And G-Kids, which is distributing the movie in the United States, has only just started to run a trailer for the movie. So some marketing is being spent in the US and possibly in other non-Japanese markets as well, but it's not going to come close to what is typically spent in most movie marketing campaigns. Consequently, I would guess that the break-even point for The Boy and the Heron may be around $70.6 million to $100 million, possibly more, which is based on doubling the movie's guesstimated production budget that may range somewhere between $35.3 million to $50 million, or possibly more, as well as regarding marketing costs for the movie as essentially being negligible. So based on that guess, if Miyazaki's latest animated creation can earn, say, at least $100 million in global gross box office revenue, then I think there's a reasonable chance that the movie will have broken even. Obviously, I can't say that with the same degree of certainty that I typically do with other movies, but what it shows is that with its current global gross box office total of $87.3 million, the movie may have already broken even, or it may be very close to breaking even, and there are still another 13 international movie markets where the movie hasn't yet opened. So I believe that The Boy and the Heron will ultimately break even. Now let's have a warm welcome for the movie that came in second place in this weekend's domestic box office, which is from Lionsgate and stars that obnoxiously woke actress Rachel Zegler, the movie entitled The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. As I had said in last week's video, which was part 16, the movie only needed to earn around $250 million to break even, and that's based on multiplying the movie's $100 million production budget by 2.5 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. That being said, the movie's current global gross box office revenue now sits at $264.6 million, and that's due to the movie domestically earning another $9.4 million this weekend, plus $5.3 million earned during the week, as well as another $6.2 million earned internationally for a global increase of $20.7 million as of Monday, December 11th. The movie's domestic share rose slightly to 51.68%, while its average weekly drop fell slightly to 32.88%. So the movie's final global gross box office total will probably be between $301.7 million at the low end, $310.3 million at the mid-range, and $325.4 million at the upper end, which is a slightly lower and narrower range than what I had projected last week, but doesn't change the fact that the movie has broken even. Now let's have a warm welcome for the movie that came in third place at this weekend's domestic box office, the Japanese movie from Toho Studios entitled Godzilla Minus One. The movie's current global gross box office revenue now sits at around $52 million, which is due to the movie earning another $8.3 million this weekend, plus $5.6 million earned during the week domestically, as well as another $3.6 million earned internationally for a global increase of $22 million. Given that the movie only has a $15 million production budget, it has most definitely broken even because even multiplying that by 3 would be an upper estimated break-even point of $45 million. But I can't really project what the movie's final global gross box office will be due to it having a very staggered set of separate international release dates, combined with the fact that many of its international releases, including in the US, are only running for limited durations. But everything that the movie is now continuing to earn is adding to the movie's overall profit for Toho Studios. Now let's have a warm welcome for the movie that came in fourth place in this weekend's domestic box office and is entitled Trolls Band Together, which I haven't been tracking closely, but does appear to be heading towards ultimately being a flop, but not in a significant manner, which is why I haven't been tracking it. With its production budget of $95 million, it has an estimated break-even point that's 2.5 times that, or $237.5 million. With its current domestic box office of $83.1 million after it earned another $6.2 million domestically this weekend, and a current international box office of $90.7 million, its current global box office total sits at $173.8 million. Based on its current average weekly drop of around 36%, which will drop slightly as it earns more, and a current domestic share of around 47.8%, I don't expect the movie to earn much more than $209 million for its final global gross box office revenue, so it will most likely fall just short of being able to break even. But the movie that came in fifth place at this weekend's domestic box office is one of our current contestants for Who Will Be the Biggest Flop? So let's have a warm welcome for the contestant from Disney, the animated movie Wish. Domestically, the movie earned another $5.3 million this weekend and $2.2 million during the week to bring its current domestic box office total up to $49.4 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $16.5 million to bring its international box office total up to $56.1 million. Globally, the movie earned another $24 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $105.5 million. So using a possible range of average weekly drops ranging from 30 to 40%, we get the following range of possible final domestic box office values ranging from a low of $60.6 million at the low end, $63.2 million at the mid-range, and $66.7 million at the upper end, which is slightly higher than last week's projection. And using the movie's current domestic share of 46.83%, which is lower than last week's, the movie's possible final global gross box office revenue may range from $129.4 million on the low end, $135 million at the mid-range, and $142.5 million at the upper end, which is also higher than last week's projection, but still far below the movie's estimated break-even point of $500 million, which is obtained by multiplying the movie's $200 million production budget by 2.5. So this movie may lose somewhere on the order of $357.5 million to $370.6 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, leaves a range of possible losses for Disney ranging from $178.8 million to $185.3 million. And we'll see shortly where that places the movie in terms of ranking for who will be the biggest flop. Now let's have a warm welcome for the movie that came in 6th place in this weekend's domestic box office, Renaissance, a film by Beyoncé, which means it fell 5 places since it opened last weekend, and that's in part due to its domestic box office dropping by 77%. Beyond that, I'm not going to focus on this movie's box office earnings this week since I don't know what the movie's production budget is. Now let's have a warm welcome for our next entry from Columbia Pictures and Apple Film, Napoleon starring Joaquin Phoenix, which was 7th in this weekend's domestic box office. Domestically, the movie earned another $4.2 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $53.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $26.8 million to bring its international box office total up to $117.7 million. So globally, the movie earned another $34.2 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $170.8 million. Using a range of possible average weekly drops of 30 to 40%, I can project that the movie's final domestic box office revenue may range from $64.1 million at the low end, $66.7 million at the mid-range, and $70.2 million at the upper end. And with a current domestic share of 31.09%, we get a range of possible final global gross box office values ranging from $206.3 million at the low end, $214.7 million at the mid-range, and $225.7 million at the upper end, which is still nowhere near the estimated break-even point of $500 million, which is obtained by multiplying the movie's $200 million production budget by 2.5. So Napoleon may lose somewhere on the order of $274.3 million to $293.7 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when we divide by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that we get a potential range of losses for Columbia Pictures and Apple Film of $137.1 million to $146.9 million, which is still incredibly close to the range of losses estimated for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, but no longer in a statistical tie as it has fallen slightly below its losses, which you'll see during the recap. And now, please give a warm welcome to our final entry, which came from Disney and Marvel Studios that slipped way down into 12th place overall in this weekend's domestic box office. The very woke 33rd MCU movie entitled The Marvels, starring Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson. For its 5th weekend at the box office, domestically it earned another $1.3 million this weekend and $860,000 during the week to bring its current domestic box office total up to $82.9 million. Now, as I had reported in a video that I had released last week, Disney does not plan to report the movie's updated international and global box office numbers anymore, but there was a small increase in the movie's international box office of $160,000, which may have been due to an adjustment for last week's box office. So its international box office total is now up to $116.5 million. Globally, the movie earned another $2.4 million to bring its current global box office total up to $199.4 million. That places the current domestic share for The Marvels at 41.6%, which is slightly higher than last week and slightly higher than the franchise average domestic share of 41.43%, but well within one standard deviation. For projections, since the movie's average weekly drop has stabilized, I will be using its value of 55.6% and one standard deviation above and below for a range from 49.85% to 61.34%. Thus, using that range of average weekly drops, I can project that the movie's final domestic box office may fall somewhere within the range from $84.3 million at the low end, $84.7 million at the mid-range, to $85.1 million at the upper end of the range. And as I had said last week, The Marvels is going to be the first ever MCU movie to not earn at least $100 million at the domestic box office, which effectively means that it's going to become the MCU's lowest grossing film domestically of all time. Not only that, using the movie's current domestic share of 41.6%, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office will only be somewhere within the range from $202.7 million at the low end, $203.6 million at the mid-range, and only $204.7 million at the upper end. So the movie will most definitely become the MCU's lowest grossing movie worldwide of all time as well. Given that the movie has a production budget of $274.8 million, we can calculate an estimated break-even point range by multiplying that by 2.5 and 3.0, which yields values ranging from $687 million to $824.4 million. And when we subtract the movie's range of possible final global gross box office values from the estimated break-even point range, we get a range of possible losses from $482.3 million to $621.7 million in global gross box office revenue. When we divide that range by 2, we get a possible range of losses for Disney and Marvel Studios ranging from $241.2 million to $310.8 million, which brings the movie incredibly close to the range of losses that The Flash has. So we'll now combine the results from our newest contestants with our other 4 contestant movies that are no longer playing in theaters. The Flash, Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction, Haunted Mansion, and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. The production budgets for each of these 4 movies, as shown in this chart, range from a low of $157.8 million to a high of $300 million. And after estimating a break-even point range for each movie by multiplying each movie's production budget by 2.5 and 3.0, we can visualize the estimated break-even point ranges along with the final global gross box office revenue earned by each movie in this next chart, which clearly shows just how much lower each of the movie's earnings were as compared to their respective break-even point ranges. And when we subtract each of the movie's final global gross box office revenues from their respective break-even point ranges, we'll get a range of losses in terms of global gross box office revenue that will then divide by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves. The resulting quotients are the estimated range of losses suffered by each studio that's responsible for producing each of these 4 movies that all flopped in theaters, which I have combined with the losses for the current contestants playing in theaters. The Flash, whose losses range from $239.7 million to $314.7 million, remains in first place, with the Marvels remaining in second place. Indiana Jones and the Dildo of Destruction, whose losses range from $176.4 million to $250.1 million, remains in third place, while Wish follows it in fourth place. Haunted Mansion, whose losses range from $138.6 million to $178 million, remains in fifth place. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, whose losses range from $78.8 million to $151.3 million, remains in sixth place, while Napoleon takes seventh place. So be sure to tune in next week for another exciting episode of Who Will Be the Biggest Flop? Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.